started and we will get started in a few minutes. We're expecting, we had several more people register, so we're just going to give a few more minutes for people to get logged in and so on. Let's get started and people can come in as they show up. So welcome everyone. This is the Eastside Progressives Summer Forum. This is our second summer forum. And tonight, first I wanna welcome everyone who's joined us and say we're with the Eastside Progressives. We're a neighborhood organization of volunteer political activists. We're affiliated with the Dane County Democratic Party, and we are hosting these summer forums on issues of public policy and civic engagement. Tonight we have as our speaker Carlene Bechen. She is with the Wisconsin Fair Maps Coalition. The Fair Maps Coalition is a grassroots organization of groups from around Wisconsin that support fair, nonpartisan district mapping. And there are over 20 groups that make up the coalition. The partners include, but are not limited to, the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign, Common Cause of Wisconsin, League of Women Voters, One Wisconsin Now, Our Revolution Wisconsin, and Citizens Action of Wisconsin. Carlene Bechen is a retired educator who became involved in the movement to end gerrymandering after testifying before the Joint Finance Committee in support of public education for several biennial budget cycles, and realizing that her words were falling on deaf ears. Legislators are unaccountable to their constituents, and it's clear that they are not listening on lots of issues, from public education and Medicare expansion to gun violence prevention and legalization of marijuana. Carlene and the Oregon Area Progressives organized the Fair Maps of Wisconsin Summit for grassroots activists in the fall of 2019. From that work, she was hired as an organizing director with Fair Maps Coalition. Tonight's presentation, Carlene is going to give us an overview of redistricting and gerrymandering and tell us more about the People's Map Commission and how we can contribute maps to the commission. In addition, I want to remind people that we are recording this evening's forum, and it will be shared on our website and our YouTube channel when it's complete. And we encourage you to share it with friends and neighbors and so on who can't be with us tonight and wish to learn about this information. So thank you, and I will turn this. I will turn this over to Carlene. Before I do that, I wanted to make one more remark, and that is that I will be monitoring the chat to look for questions, but at different points throughout the presentation, Carlene will also be asking asking for questions and stopping to do Q&A as well. Thank you.
Thanks for that introduction, Arden. I really appreciate being asked. And as Arden said, I am with the Fair Maps Coalition, and one of the things that I'll do as part of my presentation is identify the groups that are part of the lead team of the coalition that meets twice monthly. And just to let you know, we are nonpartisan. We do welcome people from across the political aisle to be involved in this movement, and so we don't see this as an issue that is a Democrat, Republican, or independent issue. Gerrymandering hurts us all. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and start the presentation. And as Arden said, I'll stop at various times during it to ask if there are any questions about what I've covered thus far. Oops, wrong one, wrong share. Sorry, I did it too fast. I shared everything. You don't want to see everything that's open on my screen. Okay, so I call this the maps mess because it is a mess, and we are trying very hard to mop it up, although there's things that seem to get spilled all the time. These are the organizations that are part of the Fair Maps lead team, and as I said, we meet twice a month. We are a group of nonpartisan, progressive, pro-good government organizations that are working to come to a fairer situation in our state. The mission, as we've described it, is to advocate for and enact in law and practice an independent and nonpartisan redistricting method in Wisconsin, and to educate and engage the public in the process of adopting and implementing nonpartisan maps. So I start out with just going over what redistricting is, just so everybody's clear on it. Redistricting is when precincts, wards in the state of Wisconsin are apportioned into districts of equal size or approximately equal size for the purposes of voting. So if these were 50 wards, 60% yellow and 40% green, and needed to be divided into 5 districts, there would be 10 wards in each district. Proportional representation is when the electorate is reflected in the way the districts are drawn. So in the left one here, long, skinny, not particularly convenient, not particularly compact districts, but proportional. The yellows have 3 districts, the greens have 2. The one on the right here, also proportional, more compact, more convenient, contiguous, and the greens have 2, the yellows have 3. By the way, the definitions and the images came from Wikipedia. Gerrymandering is when that redistricting or that apportionment happens in a way that is disproportionate to the electorate. So these districts on the left, very compact, contiguous, convenient, but yellow gets everything. The ones on the right are much more like what we have in the state of Wisconsin, where the lines are drawn in odd ways that benefit the green, even though they are not the majority. Now, in Wisconsin, we are much more a 50-50 state, but our elections do not reflect that when it comes to the state legislative level. So I'm going to play this short video for you because it explains cracking and packing, which is the method that is shown here in these very odd shaped districts. It's short. If you can't hear it, please bear with it anyway, because I'm going to turn on the closed caption, and there's a lot of, it's pretty obvious what's going on here. So this will take a second just because my computer has so many things open on it, and I apologize for that, but it is the state of my life. If I close them, I'll forget where they are. And so I have a lot of things open. Some of you probably have that same situation.
Partisan redistricting, or gerrymandering, is about fractions.
Okay. I'm going to start it again so that it all goes together.
Partisan redistricting, or gerrymandering, is about fractions, percentages. These coins represent voters in an evenly divided state, 50 dimes, 50 pennies. They elect 10 representatives. That means each district map must contain 10 coins. Of course, real people don't live in neat rows, so let's mix them up. This is our hypothetical state. Let's see what happens if the dimes draw the maps. 10 coins in each district. So first thing we do is pack the pennies. Give them 2 safe districts, but pack them solid. The remaining 8 districts are won by the dimes, by smaller but give them 2 safe districts, but pack them solid. The remaining 8 districts are won by the dimes, by smaller but still comfortable margins. The dimes win 8 districts and the pennies win 2. The dimes overwhelmingly control the legislature. Of course, if the pennies drew the district lines, the opposite could happen. Let's rig it for the pennies. For the pennies, we pack the dimes into 2 safe districts and
I'm going to stop that only because the sound and the video are out of sync with one another. I will make sure I send you that link because it's just a fabulous illustration using something as simple as pennies and dimes to show what can happen. And actually, they mixed them up in a very random way and then figured out how they could pack and crack them. So it's really bad because it rigs the political system so that one party dominates. Legislators of both parties become unaccountable, especially in districts that are way out of balance. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat and your representative is a Democrat. If it's a packed district, they don't have any fear of not being reelected, so they are less motivated. They have less incentive to be responsive, and the same goes for Republicans. So purple districts are much preferable in maintaining accountability, and it creates hyperpartisanship, mostly because we elect people at the extremes in both parties, because the diehard political activists show up for the primaries, and they elect people who tend to be at the fringes of the party. So it's very interesting and detrimental to democracy concept. So this has a history. First of all, there's been representation for forever, since the beginning of the country at the federal level, and it didn't necessarily have anything to do with specific population before 1964, when there was a court ruling that said that one person, one vote needed to be the law of the land. So prior to that, you could have rural districts that had several hundred constituents and urban districts that had several thousand constituents. So clearly the rural voice was much louder than the urban voice in those situations. So in that ruling, the congressional districts in particular have to be exactly the same population. There's a little more leeway at the state level, but not a whole lot. Our state constitution requires that the districts be drawn in ways that preserve the integrity of political subdivisions. In other words, municipal and county boundaries, ward lines, those kinds of things, maintain communities of interest, and create geographic compactness. And also in our state, there are 3 assembly districts nested inside each state Senate district. So this ruling became very important. And the last time that there was any cooperation on a bipartisan level in the legislature was the very next districting cycle in 1971 after the 1970 census. Since that time, in 81, 91, and 2001, there was divided government. In other words, the chambers of the legislature might have been in different hands. The governor might have been different than the chambers. And those maps all went to federal judges to be drawn. To give you perspective, so the Bucks are in the playoffs actually tonight. There's a game, it's on over there. I'm not watching it. There's a big lampshade in the way and I can't see the television, just so you know. But the last time that happened, Lil Cinder, who is now Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and has been for a very long time, played for the Bucks. And he's been retired for a good long while. Then came 2010 when things changed, but it wasn't quite that simple. It's not quite that simple, I should say. In 2009, Democrats had what we call the trifecta. They had both chambers of the state legislature and the governorship, and they had the opportunity to pass nonpartisan redistricting legislation, and 2 different opportunities. One was a constitutional amendment and the other was legislation. The constitutional amendment was brought by Fred Kessler and the legislation by Spencer Black. At the time, Jeff Smith, who is now in the state Senate, was in the assembly from over in the Eau Claire area. And he was head of the elections committee in the state assembly. And he tried to get his Democratic colleagues to pass the legislation. He held hearings. They didn't want to. They looked at this 2008 map when Obama won and said, no, we don't think we're going to do that because, you know, we're going to get to draw the district lines in 2010 and we don't want to give up that opportunity. So in 2010, things changed dramatically. That's the map over here on the right. This is the map that shows the results for Ron Johnson's race statewide. But you know that that was also the year that Scott Walker was elected and that both chambers of the state legislature became turned over into Republican hands. And they were not counting Democrats on the Tea Party summer and Tea Party town halls, death panels for grandma. Many of you remember going to those town halls and trying to ask real questions of our representatives and senators. But that backlash on the ACA really turned a lot of state legislatures from blue to red, along with Operation Red Map that did a lot of the funding of the Tea Party. And Operation Red Map came in after that and helped those Republican legislatures that they had helped to elect to create the maps that we have now. But our election maps over time, particularly in the Supreme Court elections, show a very different story. We are a very purple state. We go back and forth in the same counties, just 1 or 2 years apart in voting in for progressive Supreme Court candidates or for conservative Supreme Court candidates. We know these are supposed to be nonpartisan races, but we also know that the parties, you know, line up behind one candidate or the other, as do organizations like Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce, or the Realtors, or Planned Parenthood, or Wisconsin Conservation Voices. You know, but we know what that reflects. And when we look at the results on the map, you can see that Wisconsinites in general go back and forth. There are certainly some places that stay red, but there are also some places that stay blue. And there are other places that flip-flop a lot. These are the last 2 races that also show some pretty dramatic differences in certain parts of the state. So we know from those elections that were very purple. We know from our statewide elections and from presidential elections that were very purple. And when asked, voters say, we prefer a nonpartisan process. We want a nonpartisan commission. Now, this 2019 was 72%, 2020, just 3 weeks before the COVID shutdown, was 70%. Charles Franklin has said he's going to be asking this question again sometime soon. And so it'll be interesting to see how voters are feeling about that now. Also, it took 5 years to pass referendums by voters in 8 counties. And then just in the last year, between April of 2020 and April of 2021, 24 more counties, for a total of 32 counties, voters have passed referendums on nonpartisan redistricting by overwhelming majorities. As a matter of fact, Rusk County right here, in November, Trump won 70% of the electorate there, and the referendum passed by 57%. So pretty clearly, even in super conservative counties in our state, this is an issue that resonates. And in 2016, federal judges said that this court plan was intended to entrench one party in power over the life of the districting plan. As proof, the judge accepted a standard the Democrats offered in the lawsuit, the voting efficiency gap. So Wisconsin has the worst efficiency gap in the country, meaning the difference between what could happen. It's a very easy term for some very technical math, but basically it means we're the most gerrymandered in the country as far as our efficiency gap between what should happen and what does happen. And that is reflected in the number of votes cast and the number of seats won in elections. The reality by the people who, according to the people who developed the efficiency gap, is that our statewide maps would probably lean slightly Republican for our state legislative elections if they were drawn in a compact, contiguous, representing communities of interest and respecting municipal boundaries. They would still lean slightly Republican, but they would not be tilted, worse than the Leaning Tower of Pisa, if they were drawn in that manner. So our reality, the state constitution says that the legislature is responsible for the maps, does not say that they have to draw them. And in fact, they did not draw them in 2011. Joe Handrick and other experts on how to draw the lines to get the most Republican votes drew them. The governor signs the maps into law or vetoes them. We do not have a ballot initiative process in our state, so we can't put something on the ballot and change our constitution as they can in other states like Michigan and California. We do have resolutions and referendums that we can pass, as is shown on the purple map, and we have public education and awareness and raising this issue. So I'm going to stop there momentarily and see if there are any questions about just what we're talking about before I go into the work that's happening.
This is Arden. I had one question that I understand that the redistricting process is based on census data from the 2020 census, but it's never been exactly clear to me how politicians or their policymakers who are drawing the maps, how do they take that census data and look at it and say, that household is likely Republican, that household is likely Democrat?
So what I can tell you about that, and I'm going to go back to my share really quickly. Well, I'm going to go back to my share anyway. So I'm going to go back a few slides. And so if you think about these maps where we know how voting turned out on the county level, there are maps like this that go right down to the ward. So the ward that you live in can be blue or, you know, can be some shade. And so what they have done is not so, and the census gives block level data about who lives where. But the wards you can do just like this, and you can say, okay, that's a 65% Republican ward, or that's a 52% Democratic ward, and shade them in different colors. I, you know, quite frankly, I don't know exactly how they did it, but it's possible. And what I do know that they did was they used the voting data from the prior election. Okay, so they used the old wards, the 2010 wards, not the new municipal wards that cities and counties had made. So cities and townships make their wards, then counties make their supervisory districts. They go back and forth until they settle that. And then it goes, or this is how it was done prior to 2011, I should say. Then it goes to the assembly, and the assembly creates theirs, respecting those ward lines. They did not do that in 2011. They used the previous elections wards, so that they had demographic voting data for the prior 10 years on those wards. And they drew the maps using them. And then they realized that they had violated statute and precedent. And so they wrote a new statute that said municipalities and counties had to amend their lines to meet the legislature's lines. So in other words, they used voting data from at the ward level and demographic data at the block level, which is what you get from the census. So they know where I live, they know who lives next to me. If you have access to the van, you know that you can look and you can see likely party. They have that kind of stuff too. And they could figure out where people lived and draw lines between their houses if they wanted to. Does that help?
Thank you. Yeah, that clears
kind
it.
of depressing to think about that, but yeah, that's what happened. Let's see, I'm gonna move myself to okay, so that's the last thing I did. Okay, so the Fair Maps Coalition is involved in 3 buckets of work. So the legal strategy, which is being led by Law Forward, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan, progressive law firm that has been formed by Doug Poland, who was involved in the Whitford case, Jeff Mandel, who is a voting rights expert, and they are leading the charge on fighting the voter suppression laws, preparing for future litigation. They keep nonprofit organizations updated. They have they do a lot of presentations. They did Doug Poland did a presentation through the library, as a matter of fact, this past winter during COVID. Then there are the nonprofit good government pro-democracy organizations, like the ones who are part of the lead team and some of the others that Arden named. That the lead team is the lead team because redistricting is core to the work that they're doing. Some of the other groups, this is definitely something that affects their work, but it's not at the core of what they do, like Wisconsin Public Education Network, for instance. And so they are people who are advocating for these issues. And then there's the grassroots activism, which is what I organize as the organizing director for the coalition. So we are supporting the work of the People's Maps Commission because they are doing the work that we would like this nonpartisan legislation to create. Transparent, open, public input, not using voting data, any kind of partisan voting data, but looking at communities of interest. We are working at educating voters in situations like this, encouraging folks to contact legislators, holding public events, and trying to get as much media attention as we possibly can through letters to the editor, coverage of events, press releases about things that are happening, and then we also have a social media presence, which I'll talk about as well. So some of the things that have happened on the legal front this year, last summer, Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty and Scott Jensen, whom you may remember as former speaker, Republican Speaker of the State Assembly, asked the Wisconsin Supreme Court to change the rules for the way redistricted maps were litigated to make them the court of original jurisdiction. In other words, any kind of litigation would go directly to the state Supreme Court. It would skip all other courts. And it wouldn't be able to go to any kind of federal courts either. The Supreme Court set a date for a hearing on that the day after the election. Only a few things going on then. And that date was January 14th. So they also gave us a 3-week window to get comment in, not on whether maps are fair or not, but on this process question about whether they should be the court of original jurisdiction or not. We managed to get over 1,900 folks to submit comments before that deadline, which meant we had to, collect them, and then we had to print 10 copies, one for each of the justices and one for the clerk, paper copies, big binders of those comments, and get them to them by November 30th. Then the hearing was held on January 14th. Several of us, about 25 regular people, not scholars, not lawyers, just regular people like me, testified along with scholars and lawyers. It was a day, it was about 8 hours of testimony before the Supreme Court on this question. And on May 14th, 5 months later, they announced that they had unanimously rejected this rules change. So that's a win for democracy. Also on the legal front, you may know that Speaker Voss and Senator LeMahieu had hired 2 different law firms, one in DC and one in Madison, to start preparing for litigation on maps that are not drawn, and preparing for litigation to at taxpayer expense to fight maps, fight for maps. I don't even know what they could have been doing, but the maps don't exist and taxpayers are paying for it. So a Dane County judge voided those contracts, and just last week, the appeals court judge declined to let the Republicans hire those attorneys back on. So that's another win. And as far as the work that I do in supporting the People's Maps Commission, this is a commission that was created by executive order by Governor Evers after the Joint Finance Committee stripped the money and the language out of the 2019 budget. So he created this by executive order. He did not appoint these commissioners. He set criteria for the commissioners. The commissioners had to apply. Those that met the criteria, their names were sent to 3 retired circuit court judges, and those judges are the people who chose the commissioners. There's 1 from each congressional district, except the 4th has 2. And the 4th is the most densely populated and most diverse of the congressional districts in our state. Christopher Ford of Whitefish Bay is the chair of the commission. And Reuben Anthony, who is executive director of the Urban League of Greater Madison, is the representative on the commission from the 2nd Congressional District here where we live. Anne Marie McClellan and Anthony Phillips were and are involved with Fair Maps teams in their part of the state. Tony lives in Appleton, and Anne Marie lives in Menominee, which is right on the border of the 3rd and the 7th CDs up in northwestern Wisconsin. These folks held hearings from October till March in each. They were all virtual hearings. You can watch them. This YouTube link is a live link, and I'll send all of these slides to Arden, and she can distribute them. You can watch those hearings. They heard from redistricting experts in the first part of the hearings, then they took a break, and then they heard from people from each congressional district. I testified when it was time for the 2nd Congressional District. They are still gathering written comments, and more importantly, or as importantly, I should say, as importantly, they are gathering community of interest maps. So communities of interest are neighborhoods that should be kept whole when new district lines are drawn. And it's important that we get as many of these in as possible to help the commission create maps that reflect how the people of Wisconsin feel they should be represented. So I live in the Village of Oregon. The Village of Oregon, at the time of the 2011 redistricting, had 12 wards. 5 of them, all of them were before 2011, all of the Village of Oregon, most of the Oregon school district was in 1 assembly district and 1 Senate district. After the redistricting, the Village of Oregon was cracked, and 5 of the wards are with parts to the east and south, and 7 of the wards stayed in the assembly district that they were in before. But not only were that, remember I told you that 3 assembly districts are nested into 1 Senate district. Not only was my village cracked between 2 different assembly districts, it was cracked between 2 different Senate districts. And the school district was broken up between 3 assembly districts and 3 Senate districts. Now, that I believe that our village for sure should be kept whole, and as much of our school district as possible. Our school district does kind of go north up into Fitchburg, and it makes sense for that part of our school district to be in a district with the rest of Fitchburg. But for the most part, our school district should be kept whole, and maybe even our fire district, because we have shared interests, we have shared concerns. All of the townships in our fire district use our senior center and our senior center is funded in that way. And so you get the idea that it's about how people should be represented in a way that allows them to have access to their representatives and share it, and their representatives understand and share their concerns versus being all cracked apart. DeForest is even worse. Don't even get me started on DeForest. So communities of interest, as I said, are really about how we should be represented, how we should be kept together. And this is the thing that is the most important part of what we are doing right now to support the People's Maps Commission's work. We're using software called Districtr. The People's Maps Commission is working with the folks at MGGG, which is the Metric Geometry and Gerrymandering Group. I cannot say that fast. And they are, if you've heard of Moon Duchin, or if you Google Moon Duchin, D-U-C-H-I-N, she's a mathematician. She heads the lab and the team that has developed this software. It's not anything you have to download. It's on the web at districtr.org, and there's actually a portal that they have created specifically for people in Wisconsin to submit our maps. So we are drawing community of interest maps using the 2020 ward data, and we're asking people not to use political data. That it is in there, and we're saying, please don't do that. That is not what we want to have happen. We want to draw our communities of interest based on shared interests and shared concerns. As I said, my little village and our school district, we have a lot of interest in common because of those things, but we also have a big flooding problem, and we're impacted by municipalities north of us, and we certainly impact municipalities south of us, and that's a concern that we have here. We also have a concern that we don't have any public transportation, and we want to have public transportation that connects the people who live here with Madison, and we have a lot of people who live here who work at Epic. Imagine that. And so, public transportation is something that we really want more of, and so it's really important for us to think about that. We're using this 2020 ward data based on the American Communities Survey, which is information that's supplied by municipalities and counties to the Census Bureau regularly. And so it's pretty accurate. And when these draft maps are completed and the actual census data comes back in August, then those maps can be adapted how they need to be based on the specific ward data. So ways that you can support the People's Maps Commission process: drawing a map, submitting testimony, and also telling state representatives to take up the People's Maps. There is nonpartisan redistricting legislation that has been proposed, and it calls for exactly what the People's Maps Commission is doing. We are sponsoring, Fair Maps Coalition is sponsoring a week of action, a map making week of action, July 12th to the 16th. There will be lots of things on social media about that. There'll be map making workshops every day, and we are hopeful that we will generate lots and lots and lots of community of interest maps through that effort. So here's what's likely to happen next. Nonpartisan redistricting legislation was introduced in May. It's in committee now. We want hearings on it. We want legislators to have to vote on it. The People's Maps Commission, as I said, gathered input from experts through March, and now they're gathering community of interest maps, and that's through the end of July. All of that goes to the folks at Tufts University with the MGGG lab, and they will be creating draft maps using that data for the People's Maps Commission. And I'll talk just a little bit in a minute about the criteria that they're using. The census numbers will be finalized and come back to Governor Evers on August 16th is the date that the Census Bureau has said that data will be ready. We suspect that the Republican-controlled state legislature will have maps created much like the ones that we have now, probably in much the same manner as the ones we have now. The People's Maps Commission will create maps, as I said, using this open process with all this input that they've gotten from the public. And they will submit those to the state legislature to consider. Speaker Voss has made it clear he's not interested in those maps, which is unfortunate, but we're going to continue to appeal to the better angels of our state legislators and ask them to take up these people's maps that we have had input into, that we have helped to create. We suspect that the governor will veto maps that are drawn by the state legislature, and then maps will go to court. So when they go to court, there will be a second set of maps. So there'll be the maps that the state legislature draws, but there'll also be the People's Maps Commission maps that have had input from the public. And so it's really important that these maps that are created by the People's Maps Commission have a lot of input from the public, because we want them to be credible. We want them to show that folks were engaged. And we also want folks to call their legislators and ask for hearings. Oh, I misspelled that. Hearings on the nonpartisan redistricting legislation. We want them to hear from us that what we want is a nonpartisan process. We do not want legislators rigging maps to keep control. So those are two things that everybody can do. You can also download the Fair Maps Coalition's petition, and this is about the nonpartisan redistricting legislation, and we also have it online so that you can sign it online. You can volunteer with a Fair Maps team. There is a Dane County Fair Maps team. There's also the Legal Women Voters chapter in Dane County is very active on this. Please, please, please create a community map and submit comments to the People's Maps Commission. You can follow us on Facebook. If you go to our Facebook page and you like us, you click that like button, and then you go over here to the three dots, and you're in your follow settings, you make us a favorite, then you'll see everything that we post. Please share that. If you want to donate to the cause, that's also an option. And you can check out our website. As I said, these are live links, so if you click on this when you get it, You can go to the website, check out everything that we have here. We're linked to some other places as well, like the Democracy Campaign. And there's a place to sign up for our monthly newsletter. And that's it. That's what I have for you. We are the only ones who can save us. We got to use our voices and get out there and, you know, rattle the bushes or rattle cages, shake bushes, whatever it is. So, questions for me? Please, somebody.
I was wondering how to get a recording of this wonderful forum, of which I was only able to participate in a short time.
Hi, Mary. We'll be having a recording on the Eastside Progressives YouTube page, probably linked off of our Facebook page.
I didn't quite understand in what link.
He's gonna link it to the Eastside Progressives Facebook page.
Oh, I don't do Facebook. Eastside Progressive. What is your?
You know what? I'll put my email in the chat, and I can make sure I get this to you. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
We will ultimately post a link to a YouTube video also on the Eastside Progressives website.
Okay.
So the web page, you can go to find eastsideprogressives.org and you'll find the link there.
Very good. Thank you. And thank you, Carlene.
You're very welcome, Mary. Has anybody created a community of interest map yet? Okay, I think I would like to show you that site and just let you see kind of how that works. Is that okay?
Yeah, please do. That would be, yeah.
Okay. Let me just find, okay, here we go. I got to go back to my presentation and get out of it. Come on, unpresent.
Well, Carlene's doing that. I must say, you know, I'm excited about trying out creating a map myself for my neighborhood. But I'm also kind of stymied about how to, you know, what's a natural formation of common interests. Because they don't jump out at me what the theme should be for a map.
Right. So that's why this portal is really good, because it explains a lot of that information to you, so that you have more of an idea of what we're looking at or looking for. So for one thing, I said the commission had a ranked list of mapping criteria, so that is linked here. Oops, it's a PDF, so you're not going to be able to see it. I will send that to you as well, but it is on their website. They're starting with compactness, contiguity, and respecting municipal boundaries. They also population deviation, making sure that the populations are kept approximately the same. They don't want a lot of deviation, and respecting communities of interest. Their fourth criteria after maps are created using those other criteria is to look at partisan fairness. So what they're wanting to do is create maps that reflect the electorate, that are a proportionate reflection. And as I said before, Nick Stephanopoulos, who was one of the creators of the efficiency gap, says that maps in the state of Wisconsin are very likely to lean slightly Republican, and that is based on where people live. You often hear that, well, the maps are the way they are because Democrats live in cities and Republicans live in rural areas. The reality is, as I showed you on those maps of the Supreme Court, that there are a lot of those areas that go back and forth and are actually very purple. And so the way those areas vote and the way district lines are drawn is very intentional to create the idea that those areas are very red, but they're really very purple. And there's certainly some areas of our state that will always be really red in the way they vote, and others that are very blue, but more of the state that goes back and forth. So partisan fairness is the last of the 4 criteria that they have. So when you look at the different things that you can submit, if you click on what is written testimony, what is a districting plan, what is a community of interest, it gives you some information here. And then there's an example of a map from Waukesha County. The place for submitting the map is right here, or the written testimony, a districting plan. It changes depending on what it is that you are wanting to submit. There is how to draw a map. And here in the how to draw a map, there are 2 generic tutorial videos that can help you with that process. And there's also, this is the general, many of these links are downloadable PDFs. So if I click on them, they're not going to take you to oh, that one does. Nope, it takes you also to a PDF. And then there is the place here for creating maps, and also the gallery of maps that have been submitted by folks around the state. So you can see that there are quite a few of them. And all of them are not here because there was another portal before this one was created, and all of those maps have not been transferred to this site yet. But I can show you then also how the maps are drawn. And because I know my community, I'm just going to start with my community, but I'll also show you some of the features of the map. Here, this pointer, if you see where my cursor is, this hand over here on the left side allows you to grab the map and move it around. The next thing here is the paintbrush. And there you can do several different colors. This changes the size of the area that you're painting. And these are painted by ward, by the existing wards. This is an eraser. If you accidentally paint something that you didn't mean to paint, you can erase it. And so right now I'm in the drawing tab. The data layer tab gives you information like here are the county boundaries. Oh, come on, unclick. This names where the different tribal nations are in the state. These are not where reservations are, with the exception of the Menominee right here. So it does not. Actually, no, I'm so sorry. It does. Up here, there's also reservation land that's shown, but otherwise it's sort of more density of population. And then here, these are some additional boundaries that you can do one at a time. So these are the congressional districts. These are the state legislative districts. So the dark lines are the Senate districts. The light red lines are the assembly districts. These are the school district lines in the state of Wisconsin. And these are the municipal lines. You can tell that we were a homestead state. This is one of those things that you can really tell that we are a homestead state because everything's in these grid patterns. You can also get demographic data. So I'm going to unclick this. Actually, I have to go back to hidden. And you can get data by race. So when you click on this and you show the population, it shades it by, so you can see that we are mostly a white state and you can also see where most people live. So these really dark areas show the density. You can show different, so if I unclick white and now I just have Hispanic clicked, actually, let me do that again, unclick everything. Oops, sorry, I'm in the coalition thing. Sorry, I was in coalition. Okay, I'm going to go back to show population. This is population density as a whole. If I want to show where the white population is mostly located, that's how white we are as a state. If I want to show where most of the Hispanic population, notice how dramatically different that is. But also Hispanic populations in some areas that, you know, that I really didn't know. Black populations in the state, etc. Again, you can see demographic voting data. I encourage you not to use this. We really want these maps created in the way that we're asking for in legislation. And so it's just really important that we adhere to that as well and not use partisan data. So I'm going to just do a really quick demo of how to use this, just using Oregon where I live. So you can see that it zeroes right in. And then I am going to turn on the school district.
There was a
And
question about whether you can filter by judicial districts.
no, it's not one of them. Sorry. Everything that you can filter by right now is on here. And when I color something in here, I'll show you how the evaluation works. So as I said before, when we were talking, or when I was talking, I guess I'm doing most of the talking, I said that I really felt like our school district had a lot in common. So I'm going to color it first. And because it's the largest area, I'm going to use yellow because it's a lot easier to see other things when they're on top of yellow versus seeing things when they're on top of those darker colors. Okay. So you can see that our school district, or maybe you can't see because I don't have it turned on. Our school district, I'm going to go over here to the data layers and put on the county boundaries. You can see that our school district crosses the county boundaries in some areas. And I'm not coloring all of the school districts because some of our school district is closer to other municipalities, and because I live here, I know that they really have more in common with those other municipalities, and so I just don't feel like it makes sense for me to color them in to our area. So what I do now is I say, I describe what I just did. Whoops. So over here on the side, this is the Oregon School District. And then I would go on in the description of the community to tell about, you know, the school district. It serves the Village of Oregon, the Village of Brooklyn, and surrounding townships. Some of the things about my school district that are that I feel are significant, and why, you know, why those shared interests. And I'm going to come back and I'm going to do just the Village of Oregon. Oops, not that, erase that. Didn't mean to color it. So you kind of get the idea for how this works. Okay, so there's the Village of Oregon. And now I erased the yellow totally. Didn't mean to do that. Put that yellow back. And then I'm going to color in the Village of Brooklyn. The Village of Brooklyn crosses into Greene County. And so this is the Village, oops, Village of Brooklyn. And I would tell about the Village of Brooklyn. I'm going to go back to community 1, which is the Village of Oregon. And then something else that you can do, and it's highly recommended, is to put in specific places that are important. So the Oregon Public Library, I don't know about your library in your neighborhood, but we in Oregon are really proud of our library, and we're proud that we are building, oh, I didn't get all of the village, that we are building a new library. So my point of interest here is the Oregon Public Library, and I would tell about that. Another thing, I need to go back here and color in a little more that I missed. Another thing that is, as I said before, something that we're very concerned about in our village is that we have a lot of flooding. And so another thing that I did the last time I made one of these maps was to actually color in the flood zones, or to use that. Okay, I think I got all the village now. Nope, I didn't. Oh yeah, I did. Okay, so you kind of get the idea of what this is like. And then I can go here to save. Now, I'm not ready. I'm not finished with this map yet. Oh, actually, I told you I'd show you this. So this evaluation piece over here allows you to compare. I'm going to start with the school district since it's the largest. This is the size of the school district population-wise that I drew. This is the population of the state of Wisconsin. And I can compare what the demographics of the area that I've drawn are compared with the state's demographics. So that's also an interesting piece of information to have. And then, okay, so now I go up here and I can hit save. And it's going to ask me if I'm ready to submit my map. I'm not ready to submit my map. So I'm not going to proceed to that, but I am going to copy this URL, and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to open a new tab, and I'm going to put that URL in so that I can continue to work on my map. It'll come up momentarily, and then I'm just going to close this so that when I'm ready, I can go back to this submission page and submit my map. And what I do is I would put it right in here when it's done, and I would submit it to the People's Maps Commission.
There was another question about whether the maps that we prepare and submit should be aiming for a particular population criteria, or
no. You can draw them as big or as small as you want. It can be your block, you know. So I apologize for continuously going back and forth between sharing and not sharing. I want to show you one more thing that was shared with me by the people from Tufts, that kind of helps understand what communities of interest are. And they also tell a little bit about it on the page, but I think this in particular is a really good illustration from some mapping that was done in Boston. So this was a survey, a mapping of Boston area neighborhoods. And so this is basically a heat map. And the heat map shows the areas of most consensus around what the neighborhoods were is darker. So this goes from 0 to 100%. And the less consensus is lighter. So this is basically the kind of thing that we are helping to create, is a heat map that will help the People's Maps Commission create maps that keep together, keep whole those areas where there's the most consensus about what should stay together, which is why it's really important that we have a lot of input into these maps. So, you know, if you know people, particularly if you know people who live in some of the more rural parts of the state, that's really one of the places where we're having the most challenge in getting maps drawn, just because it's harder to organize in rural areas. So if you know people in rural areas who you think would be interested in this, please invite them to participate.
Thank you. This has been really a fantastic presentation, full with a tremendous amount of valuable information and things that we can take action on. And you're just clearly so dedicated and committed to this cause. It's really wonderful to listen to this and learn so much from you. I do want to
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I know I've gone to other Fair Maps Wisconsin events and been really I really enjoyed them as well, and visited the store and gotten swag from the website and so on. So I encourage people to do that. You can get signs to put up in your yard and so on. In addition, the Eastside Progressives, we have looked at redistricting and voter suppression as sort of a aggregate of ways to minimize that the forces in control want to minimize the impact of the electorate to express their opinions and so on. We've collected together a number of resources about voter suppression and gerrymandering, and we've put them together on our events and resources page. And I just want to take a brief moment to share that here. So this is the Eastside Progressives website, and I'll grab this URL. I think it was mentioned earlier in the chat, but I will include that too. And what we've done is we've put together a number of sites where you can get more information about what's going on in Wisconsin to combat voter suppression, how to follow legislation that's pending that could impact voter rights, and the groups in and among Wisconsin that are working on voter suppression issues, such as the League of Women Voters, the ACLU, and the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign. Also, we do have links to recent presentations. That there was another neighborhood action team that had an End Gerrymandering session a few weeks ago, and then there's also a link to the presentation that Carlene referenced in her talk by the lawyer Douglas Polland from the legal team of the Fair Maps Commission. This was a presentation that was done in February about gerrymandering, and we have links to this and the Team Gold presentation if you want to learn even more background and history about gerrymandering in Wisconsin and the US. So thank you again, and I want to encourage anyone who's interested to follow the Eastside Progressives webpage or our Facebook page. Contact us and reach out if you'd like to get involved. And especially, I also want to give a thanks to all the people in Eastside Progressives that have helped to make this presentation and our summer forum possible. Folks that have helped with the Zoom presentations, the press releases, the posting on the website, and every little bit that has gone into preparing for tonight's forum. Thank you very much. I'm really glad that we could have this opportunity for you to share this valuable information with us. And it looks like in the chat, you've put some information about links to the website for Fair Maps Wisconsin. And again, This is the link for the East Side Progressives website and our events and resources site. The chat, that will all be part of the recording that'll be saved off and be visible for people that want to replay this forum later. And I think that concludes our evening and our presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
everyone.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Carlene.